Welcome back to Save the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. We only got time for a short little episode today. We're going to do some takeaways from the NFL Week 5. And then in a couple days, we're going to be, probably tomorrow, we're going to be doing some NBA hot takes and kind of finish off our season preview for that. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. This is State of the Association. I want to talk about the Indianapolis Colts and their quarterback situation because Shane Steichen just came out and said that as long as Anthony Richardson is healthy, he will be a starter. So when he returns, Flacco is getting put back to that bench. And from a development standpoint, I get it because, we've seen ever since day one, the Colts want to roll with Anthony Richardson. They did it last year too. He was the starter going into the year until he eventually got hurt a couple weeks in. So we see what the strategy is here with Richardson. It is to throw him to the wolves and see what comes out on the other side. And what's supposed to come out on the other side is a prospect who's been through a lot and has faced adversity and is going to be a well-developed quarterback by the end of it. But with Richardson, I just think he's such a raw prospect. He's got all the physical talent in the world, no doubt about it. He's one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks in the league, one of the most physically gifted quarterback prospects that we've seen in recent memory. But he's a very, very raw prospect. He wasn't even completing 50% of his passes this year. And this Colts team has expectations of at least being a playoff team. They made it with Gardner Minshew last year. And right now, I think Joe Flacco is going to be able to take it to the playoffs. He's had a great game, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns. And I understand long-term, Anthony Richardson is much more the guy than Joe Flacco is. But why not win now and let your quarterback, your young second-year quarterback, learn from a guy who's been around the league for so long and just take all that knowledge in? Because Richardson, as we've said, he's a very, very green player, and it's going to take a while to develop that and to reach all his potential. And I think he's got a lot of potential, but it's going to take a while to get there. So why not let him sit and learn behind Flacco, and Flacco might even be able to lead you to the playoffs. They did with Gardner Minshew last year, and one thing about Gardner, I like him, but he can be a very conservative quarterback. Joe Flacco's the opposite. Joe Flacco's going to let that thing air out, and sometimes that can be to your detriment, but sometimes for the better. And the Colts didn't win this most recent game, but that wasn't his fault. He had a very good game. The Colts offense scored a lot of points. Their defense just allowed a little bit more. So just my take on the Colts QB situation is I think AR is going to be good in the long run. However, I believe that you might be better served to let Joe Flacco start this year, let Richardson learn from behind him, get to the playoffs, and then see where you go next season. That's my take on it. I don't know how hot of a take that is, but I have about quarterback controversies and Joe Flacco for that matter, since he was there last year. Commanders D lineman Jonathan Allen said that the QB struggles, Deshaun Watson, all the problems he's been having, are above the shoulders. And yeah, I think that's something that we all pretty much know. Deshaun, physically, he's healthy, but mentally he's not all there at all. To draw an NBA comparison, I kind of see it like the Ben Simmons situation of this guy who's got a lot of talent. And we saw with Deshaun in 2019, he led the league in passing yards. He almost had 5,000 yards, and that only happens for very elite quarterbacks and Jameis Winston. But Deshaun is a very talented quarterback when he's hitting on all cylinders. But over the past few years, and especially with his guaranteed contract with the Cleveland Browns, he has absolutely not been hitting on all cylinders. And he hasn't sustained many physical injuries and played through them the same way a guy like Baker Mayfield did his last year with the Browns, and he really struggled that last year. But, if Deshaun's been hurt, he hasn't played. And so, yeah, I think it is pretty apparent. Yeah, the issues with Deshaun are above the head. The issues are with his mentality. I'm not one to question a guy's drive because this is what he spent his whole life doing. If you make it to a professional league, that is your life. That is your career. You spend your whole life working towards making the NFL, making the NBA, making the MLB, whatever it might be, right? So you can't doubt the drive to get there. But once you get there, and once you get that money, once you get that national success, things can change for some people. And some guys are able to find extra motivation to keep them going, and that's what makes them so great. Guys like LeBron, Tom Brady, they're gonna circle something on their calendar as extra motivation for that week. Maybe an opponent came out and said something before the game about how they don't fear the team, whatever it might be, right? Just to make extra motivation and keep themselves locked in. And Deshaun has been a shining example of what not to do. He really seems apathetic to the whole situation, and he's on that fully guaranteed contract. So it's understandable why he would be apathetic, because he's making all this money. Regardless, it doesn't matter how much it hurts the team, how well he plays, because he only went to Cleveland because they guaranteed him a full contract. And look how that's playing out now. They should have never moved on from Baker. And even last year, Joe Flacco had a much better season. Deshaun Watson, the fall is sad to see, but the fall is definitely here. And I don't think he's ever going to get back to where he was. I don't think he wants to get back to where he was, because he's living now, and there's obviously the off the court issues. But in general, just Deshaun Watson not only have off the field issues plagued him, not only did all those allegations come out, but also on the field, his performance has declined drastically. So just the combination of the two, and you're paying him all that money, it's really just sad to see. As the Cleveland Browns, I believe the organization failed as a whole. And for Deshaun, he's laughing his way to the bank. And I think generally he doesn't really care for the sport like he once did. And it's a shame to see, and I hate to say that because that's an attack on character, right? But from everything that you've given us and from everything that we've seen over the past couple of years, I don't see the drive. I don't see it, tangibly when I'm out there watching a Browns game. Are firing their head coach, Robert Saleh. And, man, I think this is a lateral to negative move, because I don't think Saleh was the biggest issue with that coaching staff. Now, I know Rodgers has connections to Nathaniel Hackett, but in the past few years, every time Nathaniel Hackett has been in a position of authority, whether that's as a coordinator, whatever it might be, we have seen a severe lack of success from the field that he's in. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think Hackett, Rodgers has a good mind for the game. He's been around the NFL for a long time. So who am I to doubt him and who he trusts? But from what we've seen with Hackett, it hasn't been good. And I think Saleh, I don't think Robert Saleh was the biggest issue there. And it's coming out now as well that Saleh was considering firing Hackett until he himself was fired. And, just with Hackett once again, I think he's a bigger issue at the coordinator position than Saleh was as a head coach, because Saleh, whatever you can say about his offensive limitations, because the Jets offense has not been good under him. Guess what has? The Jets defense has been amazing with him for the most part, and they've had to deal with bad QBs putting them in bad situations like Zach Wilson. So that's a credit to the defense and the game planning on that end from Robert Saleh. So I think, having a very good defensive-minded head coach, if you're developing a young quarterback, that's not good. But because, then you kind of want to focus on the offensive end and let the quarterback get accustomed to the league. But for a seasoned veteran like Aaron Rodgers, I think a defensive-minded head coach can work out pretty well, because it can make life a lot easier for the offense if the offense is able to put themselves in positions to win. So I think, once again, it came down to the coordinator, because we saw with Nathaniel Hackett over for the Denver Broncos. There was that year with Russell Wilson, his first year there, where the defense was really, really good. But guess what? Russell Wilson, the offense could get nothing going. And Hackett was very good in Green Bay a long time ago. But ever since then, we've just seen middling results. I think he was the biggest issue. I think Robert Saleh could have worked out, once again, if we're talking about a head coach, a defensive-minded head coach with a veteran of the game. Look at Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. The Patriots had that good defense for so long, and Tom Brady did just fine, right? So I think Saleh, moving him, I don't know that you're going to find a much better coach at this point in the season, and especially learning a new game plan for a team that came in with aspirations of winning a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers on the helm. Firing your head coach this early in the season or mid-season at all, it's not a good move, and it does not help. Over the last couple games, Travis Kelce has actually looked pretty good. He got off to a really, really slow start to the year. After the first 3 weeks, he was on pace for about 330 receiving yards over the whole season. And since then, he's been a lot better over these last couple of weeks. And, obviously it was going to improve. I don't think Travis Kelce is going to have 330 yards throughout a whole season just by virtue of even if his physical ability is declining. Travis Kelce has been in the game for so long, he knows how to affect the game, even if he's not much of a blocker. His primary role as a tight end is to be a receiver, so just being out there and being with a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, Kelce was going to get better as the season progressed, and he has. But I think now what we're really going to see with Travis Kelce and how much he still has in him, I think that's going to come into play a lot for the rest of the Chiefs season. Now, they're 5-0 right now, but really their offense hasn't looked too great. Patrick Mahomes specifically, if you just look at the stats, and there's more to the game than stats, of course, but he hasn't been that great as a quarterback. And if you watch the game, obviously not all the picks are his, but Patrick hasn't had the best season by his standards for sure. And now Rashee Rice is going to be out for the year. So someone's got to step up. And Travis Kelce is certainly the guy that they're going to trust and that they're going to go to. So he has to be better than he was the first couple of weeks. And I think he absolutely will be, because they're going to be giving him a lot bigger target share. He's going to be getting a lot more receptions, and the offense is going to run through the Mahomes to Kelce connection. And that's absolutely fine. It's nice to see Travis back in form, because I had a popular little segment for my standards. My most viewed segment of all time was kind of asking the question, what's going on with Travis Kelce after week 3 when he had a really slow start to the year. But just because that segment was pretty successful, I don't want to see any player do bad. Am I going to criticize them if they don't perform well, if they don't perform up to par with what we might expect of them? Sure. But I don't actively root on the failure of any player. So it's great. It's amazing to see Travis Kelce back and in form. And I think the Chiefs are going to go to him a lot more, obviously, with the loss of Rashee Rice. And the Chiefs are going to go as far as Kelce Mahomes can take them. Thanks for listening. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.